Welcome to another episode of Wild and Well. Today I am joined by dietitian Atheana Brown to talk all about mum bod pressure. So welcome, Athena. But before we get into this conversation, can you tell us one thing that you did today to take care of or nurture you?
Ooh, that's a good one. What did I take? Oh, it's only 9 o'clock here. What did I do? My one thing. I think today, as I was like, I have to do the running around with the kids, and I feel like not in any of those times, but when I was walking out to kind of my office, I was really noticing like the signs of the springs. We have a lot of like maple trees down our driveway, and the like little flowers have fallen off of the maple trees. And I just noticed them all on the ground, and I was like, we don't ever like celebrate these flowers, or I feel like put any like wonder or like excitement to them. So they have already fallen, and now that the leaves are gonna like burst and explode. But yeah, I appreciated the little flower blossoms off of my maple trees this morning.
That's beautiful. You're so right. We appreciate maple trees for so many other things, but not for that, do we? And
Mhm,
to take
mhm,
those moments, I think, is really significant.
mhm.
So, can you share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, of course. So I am very loudly and proudly a non-diet, body inclusive, fat positive, registered dietitian. I work within the frameworks of like health at every size and really take a non-weight centric focus, which is like the bipolar opposite of how we are trained and pumped out of the system of being dietitians. So lots of roots in kind of like an anti-oppressive practice, lots of professional development to get into the space of helping support people move and guide and, slide through recovery, if that's the term, or just heal their relationships with food and body. Um, I tend to work with a lot of people who have diagnosed or undiagnosed eating disorders, mostly like binge eating, but also anorexia and all forms in between. And I also work with like families, a lot of moms, especially when they are getting like triggered or not sure how to kind of approach food and eating with their kiddos. A lot of times, and we're going to probably get to this in today's topic, but there's this generational like cycles of body shame and dieting and what we just know about bodies and families. And a lot of times, parents, moms feel conflicted with that and want to make some shifts and changes, but want to do it through a lens of maybe that is intentful around not causing disordered eating or body image issues for their kiddos. So just how we navigate that of raising intuitive eaters and kids that maybe have a different trajectory from us. And then those are kind of the two buckets. And then my previous role was in primary care for a long time. So I can all of the like GI and everything under the sun in terms of like more basic nutrition stuff related to like medical nutrition therapy. So like cholesterol, diabetes, PCOS, those kinds of like more health condition things. But my love is really having difficult, meaningful conversations around food and body and like unpacking that with people. Yeah.
And how did you move in that direction? Because that is not the direction that all dietitians move in.
For sure. Yeah. So so like when I came out of school, I got my first job like right away in the community. And there was a lot of, referrals for just like high BMI or like weight loss and all this stuff. And I was just like, okay, so I would see these people and like it was never, and even people with like a diabetes diagnosis or something, cholesterol, whatever it was, there was always this like elephant in the room that was never being addressed. So we could talk about fiber and like all the little nutrition strategies, but we weren't getting deeper to the levels of like, why are we binging on sugar? Or why is this like such a dysregulating food? And again, it's from this culture and the way we like typically approach management for diabetes is, or what we know about it, right? Or about weight loss, right? It's just not something that is, evidence-based and really ethical, really. And then I went to an eating disorder conference. Lindo Bacon was presenting, and she was talking about weight stigma and anti-fat bias, and obviously how problematic healthcare is. And I just sat in the audience like crying because I had done so much harm to my clients, feeding into those systems, and it was really shitty. Sorry, can we swear on the podcast? I don't know. Okay. And it sucked. And it was really confronting. There was obviously a lot of what's the word? I'm forgetting the word. Just like unsure because training was one way and I wanted to like change my practice. Cognitive dissonance. And it took me like as I kept working through the eating disorder space and learning about, beautiful, amazing fat activists and, a lot more on the health at every size paradigms that it was like, wow, we really need to like shift how we're focusing and supporting people because we can't have like weight loss and eating disorder on the same like trajectory. They can't exist in the same room. So yeah, I think it was just really looking at like how I was practicing and how I wanted to kind of change. And then of course, like when I had my first kiddo, she's 8 now. It really, I think before she was born, it ramped up, but then once she was born, I was just like, I do not want to be, influencing you in any way that is just kind of contributing to these systems that are super sticky and not helpful.
Yeah, it's amazing how our careers can shift and how they shift even more when we become mothers. Like that, it sounds like that
Hmm.
became even more of a passion for you having a daughter.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Wanting to protect her from diet culture because it's literally bleeds into everything. So we have a lot of like weekly conversations about, what we're learning in school and, or this new computer game at school they're playing that talks about food. And I'm just like, I hate that. Let's reframe a lot of this too, right? Because they have to be able to have the skills to kind of have their own understanding and judgments of things. Not every message is for everyone kind of thing. So yeah, lots of ways diet culture comes up for sure.
And what exactly is mom bod pressure?
Ooh, yeah. So I think it's just this like cultural norm, this felt pressure maybe moms have. Sometimes it's referred as like bounce back pressure as well, right? To go back to, your pre-baby weight, your size, your shape. But I think that there's also this extension of like your exercise regime or like your muscle mass or like what you were into before, right? Maybe also including like your ability to like produce your mental capacity, life as it was before you had baby. There's kind of this like idea that like nothing is supposed to change or we celebrate women's bodies maybe when they are pregnant but then as soon as that's over it's kind of like you're disgusting and you need to like engage in all of these like things to help support you be the person you were before which like you'll never be, right? It's just it's just horrible, right? And moms are always at this like vulnerable stage, especially first time moms. Like, oh my goodness, it was terrible first time mom experience of like you're navigating everything for the first time, right? You're so feeling incapable of all of everything, right? Everything's new and it's so sticky, right? And I think from like a lot of the pelvic physios I connect with or collaborate with, like most of them say like it takes 18 to 24 months to kind of recover from birth, but yet we have this expectation like that 6 week appointment, like you can go exercise and go like do all this like hardcore stuff that maybe you did before, but like is that really like what you need? And is that the best way to maybe channel our energy? The capacity and time that we have kind of thing. So basically pressure that we need to like go back to how our bodies looked before we had babies.
It's
Mhm.
interesting because I talk a lot about this with our identity and our habits, not so much our
Yeah.
body specifically, but everything does
Hmm.
change when you become a mother. And we don't often get educated on that ahead of time. So I think there's this
Yeah.
pressure from society and everywhere to have us bounce back to that in all
Mhm.
respects. And we don't have the education around how much our life, our priorities, our values, our brain, our bodies, like everything changes when we become a mother.
Hmm. Hmm.
And often it takes time to realize that you don't want to go back to that. But I think a lot of mothers, especially the first time, do feel that pressure and they want to try and they push to go back to who they were before. And it takes
Hmm.
some work and some reflection to realize it's okay. We're just a different upgraded version of ourselves, and that's okay
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even just like we might get to this later, but like even just like how society like values moms too, right? And just that like narrative of I feel like I saw an Instagram story this week and it was like this common song that was like just saying her day of like what she was doing, of all the things she was carrying and meeting her kids' needs and feeding them and loving them and rocking them and all the things. And then it's just like, but I'm just a mom, right? Like it's just not this valued job or role that's, supported or valued in our society too, right? So
Hmm.
it
I
makes
really
sense that
felt
we don't
that
want to.
before. Yeah, before I
Mm-hmm.
became a mom, I like feel ashamed to say it, but I had those sort of thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it
Mm-hmm.
was just baked into me from our society and from like culture that, yeah, moms are just moms if they don't have some meaningful outside the home job as well. And after
Mm-hmm.
becoming a mother, I learned from experience that that's ridiculous. But it took
Mm-hmm.
my own experience of going through that to realize that. So I think it is really ingrained in us.
Mm-hmm.
What do
For
you
sure.
like? How do you see this mom bod pressure and this bounce back culture? Like, how is it? Um, like, how does our society, I guess, bake this into us? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does that
Mm-hmm.
look like?
So I have a list of so many ways. So I feel like even being pregnant or like in that phase, like just indirect comments, right? Of friends and family and loved ones or lots of strangers like commenting on your body, right? The focus is on that. It's almost like you have a sign that says like at any moment, please comment on my body when you're pregnant. Like, right? It's like so frustrating, right? So these body-based compliments, right? It's like just super loud. You're looking X, Y. It could be positive or negative, and then after you maybe have baby, they still continue, right? Like, and they're celebrating maybe if there has been like dramatic weight loss or shifting of whatever water or fluid or a baby coming out, right? There's constant comments, right? And I remember being told in like 1 week that I like was having twins. There was no way I was having one baby because I was so massive. And then by another person saying I was grossly underweight and unwell and I need to go like see my doctor. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like unleashing these comments. So it's like, how can you not internalize that and be like, oh, like, there's such a focus on bodies in our society. Um, Even with like social media and advertising, like any targeted ad towards moms is a straight sized woman who's like got her shit organized and has like this ideal aura of like perfection, right? It's through those like mom Facebook groups, right? Always sharing their like secrets of like getting back or getting rid of their pooch or tummy or whatever they're labeling it, right? Or that focus on, I'm 3 months postpartum, like what should I do now? And just everyone diving in like wolves to like save that person. It's through like workout instructors or programs or plans that are like focused on weight loss, that are focused on like moms and like changing their bodies back to whatever, right? They're taking a very like weight centric approach. That's external shell, not like an internal approach. There's a lot of instructors that don't like it's very minimal, but there are some instructors that completely don't focus on like body changing through exercise. Those would probably be more helpful. It's in like our weight-centric healthcare. We have like ridiculous, annoying BMI guidelines of like what your BMI is and how much like weight you're allowed to gain in pregnancy, right? Or how much is assumed that you're losing like postpartum and that body size always being the focus, right? It's through like people of size not being represented or rarely being represented in media or especially like mom anything, right? It's like, how are we blocking out body diversity when we're, not seeing those bodies? And when they do are allowed, like the papaya lady that everybody knows, she's like slammed for being too fat or too this or too that, or, not even whatever it is, right? It's just like constant comments from strangers and people that like know better, right? usually a lot of men commenting on how women's bodies should be too, right? I think it can also manifest in our society around like shame and expectations and like even how you choose to feed your child. So I feel like you probably have episodes on like formula, breastfeeding debate that's always like combated. It could be, it's almost like this extension of like your lifestyle is how you like feed your kid. And some people's like full identity comes around like food and eating and how they move and what they believe in around food, right? That toxic wellness diet culture, right? It's like that shame in your kid eating a processed food, eating McDonald's. Like people are just judging people, right? I feel like there's so many ways moms get targeted at, not doing the right things, but then doing the things and then still being judged on what their choices are, right? It's like you're never winning, right? But I think like it's so deeply problematic how diet culture comes up, right? And if we really look at how devastating and common eating disorders are, or how common like 75% of women or people with uterus engage in disordered eating behaviors, like these messages just keep feeding all of these systems that like your body is so important, is your self-worth. And even like when we have this like perception from media of like people of size or fat people, I use that word as a descriptor, as a neutral term, but just how they're like perceived in media. They're perceived sloppy, unprofessional, like uneducated, not like the butt of the joke, like all those things. And, when we have this cultural idea that our bodies don't change, pregnancy happens. Like we start like internal, and again, everyone's individual, but like internalizing some of those labels and identities and like deep shame for like your body changing. Um, so I feel like there's a lot of ways society manifests this for moms, and I'm sure there's like a whole bunch more, but that's kind of where I brainstormed this morning. I don't know. Do you have any more to add or like things agree or disagree or?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And gosh, there's probably so many other ones, but you listed off so many there that I think that's a great summary. I just like while you were talking there, I was thinking, how do we work around this? Like for if we're talking about moms specifically, it's
Mm-hmm.
important that we do take care of our wellness and our health and like help
Mm-hmm.
our bodies get strong after we have babies. How do we balance
Mm-hmm.
that self-care with not buying into and being totally caught up in the diet culture? Because there's got to be a balance, right? We don't want to swing too far the other way either, because we do care
Oh my
about
God.
ourselves and our bodies.
Yes, yeah. But I think that's like as a society, like, or yeah, I think that's like that whole that could be a whole podcast episode, right? Of like self-care and what that looks like for moms, right? Self-care doesn't mean we have to be like meal, like it doesn't mean like it can mean so many things, right? It doesn't, and it's also like I'm such a big advocate of like meeting your food choices with like your capacity and your mental health, right? If it is like stressing you out and causing so much, food noise, we talk about a lot more lately, and just like dysregulation with food and eating, that may be really scary for you, right? So, sorry, the question is, how are we like helping fix this and move along kind of in working through this, or?
Yeah, or how do we balance it with taking care of ourselves and not getting caught up in like the weight loss and maybe like the more superficial bit, but also wanting to feel strong and like solid in our bodies. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, but I think it's like each person has to individually, maybe if they want to, look at their relationship with food and bodies, right? I think there's a lot of, again, wellness, diet culture influence that like there's one best way of eating, and food equals your body changes and food equals health, which there are no causation studies showing, proving, except for allergies, that like, hey, 100% correlation in, so I think it's like understanding that. I think it's also like redefining what health is for yourself. I think a lot of times when we're looking at, defining health for ourselves, it is super rooted in like body change. But like when we're taking a non-diet, again, this is the realm that I like to focus in. It's, mental health. It's like your self-care bucket. It is, how, like other markers of health that are more important. Like, are we talking about cholesterol? Are we talking about blood sugars? Are we talking about your blood pressure? Those are health markers rather than kind of our scale. The weight is really a poor indicator of health, right? So, this stage in our life, how can we maybe do some self-care practices that are going to be nourishing and fulfilling, and also having that like self-compassion that like, yeah, I don't have an hour every day to go for a walk like I did before I had kids. Like, would love to go back there, but it's just, we have to be like shifting, what we have now, what is doable, right? So I think like every person has their own relationship with food and eating, and I think like if there is some disordered eating behaviors happening, like we need to work on those because obviously we're going to influence how all of that is within the home too, right? So I think that's one piece to it. I think just moving forward with like not commenting on people's bodies is like should be a rule for all of society, right? When we're commenting on someone's body, we are really casting more of our, like sharing more of our opinion of how we feel in our own bodies than really the person we're talking about. There's so much judgment. There's so much harm that can come from that. So comment on people's like internal, like values driven things. When we're like told like, oh, you're so pretty or like cute outfit, like it's just so superficial and like shell, right? Like what moms need like deep motivation of like their value and like complimenting on like those really intrinsic things and them being kind or generous or whatever it is, right? Those compliments always land so much better too, right? Some other ideas of how we can work through some of this is I think this one's, not everyone's ready for this, but really identifying like your privileges, understanding what those privileges are when we're looking at, the health industry. It is always a straight-sized, white, thin woman who is sharing her advice on these things, right? So we have to understand the context or lens that that's coming from. So my privileges, for instance, I'm straight size, I'm cisgender, I have an abled body. That is like so significant in what I can and can't do, right? I'm educated, there's financial privileges, I have food security. Like I live with an autoimmune disease, but it's not debilitating. That's kind of the lens that I have my understanding from too, right? So when we look at like the social determinants of health and really look at people's like how the privilege pyramid, like that is such a significant contributor to what we can do and how our health is and our genetics. If we had a group of people, 50 people all eating the same and exercising the same, there would still be body diversity. There would still be variances in health and blood sugars and all of those things, right? So how we can kind of detach some of this like importance of it being, so important, our food and eating and movement choices, I think is at the core too. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And is that some of the work that you do with clients? Like you work through all of those different aspects?
We try to. Like, I think I like to have, like, I'm a guide, so I'm not telling people what they need to do or how they should feel. But if food and eating is sticky and body is really, hyper importance, like, we have to unpack that a little bit, right? There's a lot of normalized anti-fatness, fat phobia, weight-centric ideals in our society. And sometimes facing those and unpacking those are like uncomfortable. There's not a lot of people that sit in, what does being fat mean, right? How is your relationship with food and eating? There's a lot of things we learn that are maybe not really supportive, right? And can cause a lot of like mental, emotional, physical stress for people. So yeah, I really help people make food and eating be less scary, be 1% of their day, not 99% of their day, and supportive because I think we're all trying to do our best. And I think along the lines, it's so hard not to be influenced by whoever the most famous influencer is current day. So yeah, we kind of working on those roots and really trying to like change that cycle of and that narrative of body shape and dieting being kind of what defines our self-worth. Hmm.
And how do you think on like a greater, larger scale, like as a society, how can we start to shift some of these harmful stigmas and pressures placed on mothers when it comes to their bodies, but just women in general, even?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot. The bigger systems are obviously bigger than you and me, but just like how we started the conversation of like valuing moms, valuing their work that they're doing. When we look at like, I know we're not in the US, but the US maternity leave, like how could you not take that bounce back culture for that? Like however weeks they get or a couple months, right? Childcare, like how, like especially in Canada and Ontario, especially, like how are we supposed to manage and, survive? I just feel like women and people with uteruses and families are really unsupported. Like it's designed to fail. Um, I think like our approach to healthcare, so when we're really focused on BMI and weight range suggestions and all of that, obviously like that weight-centric model is again harmful in a lot of ways. Even like how we label people of size in pregnancy being like high risk, like people of size can have very beautiful, healthy, uncomplicated pregnancies, but we just give them labels, right? I think normalizing body diversity is like a big system structure cultural thing that needs to like shift, right? And also normalizing that bodies change in life. When we look at the rates of eating disorders, it's always spiking when there's body changes. So puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, and menopause are like the most common times for people with uteruses. We are led to believe that our bodies are these like static vessels that never change. And if they do, then it's like, oh, out of our, like that we need to control it, right? Or harness it back. So just like some of these like narratives around that, I think from that like societal lens would be helpful. And then also really like unpacking this like anti-fat bias and these like really deep roots that like being smaller equals better health. There's so much research that shows that that is wildly incorrect. And 98% of people can't sustain significant weight loss like long term and maintain it. So when that is always like a treatment method for literally every condition, we're really causing harm. And that weight cycling is usually that trajectory those people take and causes way more havoc in the body than if we just kind of made peace with food and worked on those relationships with food and eating. Yeah. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, it is. And it makes me wonder, like, how do we make these changes? Like you mentioned before, some things that we can do as individuals. And
Mhm.
are there things that we can do? Like, is it having these conversations? Is it, I don't know, advocating for more diversity in advertisements? Like, what are ways that you see that we can start shifting things?
Yeah. So I think it's like naming your own privileges and looking and understanding the lens that you're viewing things through, right? Taking that to media, right? That media literacy of like, whenever we're getting triggered, like it's usually someone's body view first, and then they zoom in about their like nutrition idea or like workout regime. Like they're straight size people, right? That is their privilege that they're working through that lens. I think it's also unpacking your internalized fat phobia or anti-fat bias. We all have it. I do too. Everyone does, right? We have it internally for ourselves, we have it externally towards other people, and then society as a whole treats fat people really shitty. How can we, like, through books, through learning, like, develop a different lens or perspective for ourselves? And then how we're like teaching our kids. There's amazing books at the library of talking about kids of size and just normalizing that in their environments. When there is a movie and they're making like a comment, I know like that Trolls movie that kids love, or in Canto there's like a line talking about fatness and stigmatizing people, like hitting pause and being like, hey, how do you think that person feels? And just like that's not how we treat people of size. Really normalizing the word fat, using it in the house, teaching kids that it's not this like derogatory word, but also explaining to them that it is a really like historical, hurtful word, and how we don't use it that way, right? It's teaching living through your values, as well, of like how can we treat people with kindness? How can we normalize body diversity? How can we feed our brains through social media, like following diverse accounts or following fat creators, fat activists that are really trying to create some change in this area, right? What are we putting our money into, right? I'm not going to name some specific companies, but they only promote certain size models and like offerings and things like that. Every time we spend money, we are voting the systems and structures that we support. So, how can we diversify that? Um, and then I think for yourself, like unpacking and doing some of the work, right? Because I think when we look at these deep roots of anti-fat bias, it's in racism, it's in white supremacy, it's in colonialism, which is uncomfortable topics for anyone to explore and navigate. So, um, again, I'm not the person to like explore that or do a podcast as being like the white straight sides girl, but I think there's a lot of amazing creators, activists that are doing really important work. I had two book suggestions. I think I told you, Hillary, that I wanted to share, and it kind of fits in perfectly here. So, one is called Fearing the Black Body. It's all about anti-fat bias by Sabrina Strings. And it really goes through unpacking and exploring all of this. Just like the little nugget is basically how white women were trying to separate themselves from black women, and weight loss and being skinny was one of the ways. So fearing the black body, fatness was at the core, where a lot of this has stemmed from. And then the other book is called The Body's Not an Apology. Sonia Renee Taylor, another beautiful big black lady, that has such beautiful messaging on kind of like body liberation and just that, like your body is not an apology. Mhm. So I would say like learn from the people that are, marginalized and are doing the work that, yeah, of healing and trying to change your relationship and understanding too. Because we're all just like making stuff up. We're all just floating in these systems and just doing what the norm is. And again, that like change catalyst can be really small seeds. I got a message this morning from a follower. I was saying something about what are you celebrating today? And she said like, oh, it was something about spring of like, oh, the big fat birds or something. And then she changed it and she's like, no, the big whatever birds. And I'm like, no, use the word fat. Like it's okay to say that. Like we need to normalize that. And then it was like a couple weeks later, she messaged me this morning and she was like, thank you for making me like sit and ponder on that word. And she's like, I'm in my own recovery of like bulimia and shifting her relationship with food and body. And she's like, and she's a therapist now. And she's like, and I was so stuck. So, like, just those like little seeds, or how we can like counteract, when someone does a body compliment, like, how can we like shift that normal exchange that like I'm not going to give that back to you, or like don't comment on my body, or like those little ways that we can support bigger systems, because our kids are always watching, right? And if they're learning that we comment on bodies and we value, certain things about people, how like they of course will be, trained to do that themselves. So yeah, there's a lot of little ways that we can make some shifts.
Yeah, there's so many ways there that you described. And throughout this conversation, you've mentioned a number of ways how we can shift this in our children and the future generation. And if we do that, I think that is such a big impact. And I love how you talk
Mhm.
about fat just being a word and dismantling its negativity that we have associated with it and helping our kids understand that, because children naturally just use the word in ways that
Yeah,
isn't, it's just descriptive. Like your
exactly.
that lady messaged you about the
Such a
fat
bird.
bird. Like sometimes
Yeah.
like the kids will talk about their bodies being fat, but in a great way. Like they don't mean it in a
Mm-hmm.
negative way, right? Until
Mm-hmm.
they learn from our society what that
Mm-hmm.
means. And then they either shift
Yes.
it or get ashamed or all the other things that can happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Are there other things that you recommend doing with our kids? You've mentioned a number here, but is there anything else that comes to mind to help our children have a healthier relationship with their bodies and other people's bodies?
Yeah. So I love the one thing we said it this morning at breakfast. Like, if someone can't change themselves, like change something about themselves in 30 seconds, we don't comment on it. So if they have ketchup on their face or they have toilet paper coming out of their pants, that's something we can like help them or comment on, right? But if they're missing an eyeball or they have a big like blister or, there's something different, we don't comment on it. But I always try to foster this environment that like if kids have questions about bodies, if we want to talk about fatness. And then my one daughter like was like, "Oh, I don't like women that have short man hair." And I was like, "Okay, we need to like talk about that and like explain how like people can be however they want to be kind of thing, right?" And the superiority like we talk about the patriarch in little ways of how like in our society, girls are always, supposed to be wearing pink. And that's not true. You could, like, little ways that we can, like, interrupt that, like, understanding of how bodies should be. And I think, like, as the dietitian part, I'm going to, like, go back to food, but just, like, really, how can we, like, provide an environment? And that's essentially what intuitive eating is, where kids are allowed to, like, listen to their bodies. They're allowed to eat a variety of foods. Food is served in a neutral way. There's no good foods or bad foods or limits or restrictions. Because really, when we look at us as adults, we have these ideas of like dichotomous food stuff, like good, bad, whether it's bodies or healthy, unhealthy. But when we really go back to like kids and babies and toddlers, they are just like neutral. They have this like beautiful, awe and appreciation for their body. They don't know foods is good or bad. They literally just listen to their fullness and hunger and then they like move on, right? There's no like, there's cupcakes and like getting crazy about the cupcakes. It's just a floating object in their environment, right? There's no body shame, right? We were taught all of these things and these constructs about our body shame and hating our bodies and it being these ideals. The same with food, right? It being healthy, unhealthy, and really complicated. It doesn't have to be that way, right? It's just a byproduct of how we've been socialized and what those family cultures are. So I think doing the work yourself is really going to impact like how you're showing up in the house for sure. And like there's a lot of awesome parents that like are doing really hard work and feel like, oh, well, I have to have it figured out and perfect before I can have kids or like influence them. No, like you can be doing this alongside each other, right? Yeah.
I think that's a lot more realistic because our children, they are really good teachers for us and they highlight
Mhm.
things that we're doing, things that we're saying that we don't even have awareness around. So I think it's
Mhm.
great to do work before having kids, but that's,
Mhm.
I don't think there's
Such a
any reason.
privilege.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
there's always work to do, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we
Yeah.
need to like wait on that or anything, but
Absolutely.
allow our children to help us learn and be curious about how
Mhm.
we see the world and ourselves and why we say the things
Mhm.
that we say.
And I really think it's just like coming back to like your values and really being rooted in those and that helping inform like your decisions of like how you show up, how we approach food and eating and our decisions about health and well-being.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great. I'm going to use that, what you talked about at the beginning of this question around the table at the breakfast, just like mentioning
Like
to
the
your
30
kids that,
seconds.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
you can comment on things that people can change in 30
hmm
seconds.
hmm But
Yeah.
always like leaving it open that like if they have questions about bodies to talk to you, right? My daughter this last week was talking about like women that have like aprons. Like one of her teacher has like an apron or like what do they call it? Fupa. It's like another term I just learned. Fat upper pussy area or just like a belly, right? That's like under their belly. And she was like, "What is that, mom? Like, what is that?" And so we had to like talk about it and explain how like, well, sometimes people have bellies and this is what it looks like. So we went on the good Google and we like saw what it looked like under the shirt. Like, like we have to normalize these things. My husband lives with like an ostomy and like my kids are very like in the realm of like what that is and why daddy has that and how like you can't really see it when he's out in public, but like he lives with that and like how there's a lot of like unseen things, about people's bodies and we can be curious, but we just have to like talk to the people that we know, right? Or feel safe. And I think, sorry, I'm going into a tangent again. Even with like the word fat, like we were talking about like using it in the house and how we're describing it maybe in nature. But I think another knee-jerk reaction too is, and I know I was a kid and got shamed for this when I was little, like commenting, like, wow, that person's really fat. I would say in like a grocery store. And like most people rush over being like, shh, don't say that, or like that's bad, right? But that's just further stigmatizing that word and teaching them that like fat equals like wrongness or badness or like shame, right? So like even in those moments, how we react and maybe just say like, yeah, that is one way we can describe that person's body. And like we use that term as like a descriptor and like, but then like diffusing it that way, but then also maybe sharing about like how we don't comment on people's bodies. If we have questions, come to mommy or daddy or your parents, etc., kind of thing. Just those little ways that we navigate body comments too can be sometimes like happen in the moment and you're like, kind of, how do I manage this? So that's a common one for parents.
That is, I think, as a parent, like we've all probably been in those situations. And
Oh,
maybe even
yeah.
if like somebody's listening and they didn't react that way that you described
Hmm.
that we could and make it more neutral, we can
Hmm.
always go back and have those conversations with our kids, right?
Absolutely.
So
That repair. Yes.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the biggest part of parenting, I think, is repair, isn't it? It's not getting it perfect
100%.
in the moment.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Was there anything that you really wanted to talk about here, or you think is important that we mentioned that I didn't ask you about?
Ooh. Um, I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like we went over lots of good topics. And there's just a lot. Like there's lots of layers. So I just hope people don't feel overwhelmed. Um, it's, slow picking at I always picture an onion and just like unraveling the layers. And again, showing up for your kids, feeding them, just like being there is like the biggest form of like flexing, right? So, in little ways we can make some small changes. And again, there's no like perfect spectrum. For sure, there's days that are really hard on my end too. Just because I'm a dietitian doesn't mean that everything is perfect. That's all lies. No. Yeah.
And how can people work with you and find out more about what it is that you're doing in this space?
Yeah, so I am registered in Ontario as a dietitian, so I can only work with people in Ontario. I do virtual stuff, and then we have a physical place that we can meet. We renovated a barn on our property, and we also have a yoga studio on the other half of it. So yeah, through online, I got my website. It's peacefullynourished.ca. And then Instagram, I feel like is the more active place I am, which is the same thing, peacefully nourished. And yeah, I also have like a newsletter and like a podcast as well too. It's called Diet Culture Dropout. But those would be, yeah, the best ways to connect. And I'm always open to having conversations. I offer like a discovery call to just kind of see if people are at their, stage and place in their relationship with food and eating that they're ready to maybe take a more intuitive eating and non-diet approach. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge here and all the examples of what you do in your own life and with your children to help to navigate this and yeah, just make us feel more okay in our bodies and not have to, I guess, buy into all the cultural unhelpful norms that there are. So thank you so much
Mhm.
for that and for the work that you do.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on. I'm very appreciative of you and the work that you do as well and supporting moms as well.